What's going on, y'all? It's Rob here, aka The Nerdy Athlete. Today we're going to be reviewing and giving you my reactions to Part 7 of Netflix's The Ranch. Stay tuned. If you haven't seen Part 1 through 6 of The Ranch, it's pretty much a story about the Bennett family and their ups and downs. And if you haven't watched it, I recommend going back and watching that. And then watching the new season, or Part 7 is what they call it. Just released on Netflix September 13th, 2019. I recommend going to check that out, then coming back to watch this review, because this review is going to be filled with plenty of spoilers, and I don't want to ruin it for you. Before I get to this review, it's a big-time review, so for a big-time review, I need to put on a big-time hat. Oh, yeah, that's looking good, baby. Here we go. You ready? So, yeah, Part 7, it opens up with, the Colt and Abby drama that we left off in Part 6 with. They just got separated and all that, and after that, it just kind of cuts to Luke and Mary in Vegas. They're getting married by the Elvis Presley. Yeah, that Elvis Presley. But yeah, it because at Part 6, end of Part 6, he left off. Luke and Mary just ran off and didn't say anything to anybody because he didn't want to go to the veteran meetings or whatever at the VA. So he ran off with her, and they get married and everything. And then that night after the wedding, they're in a hotel room, and Luke just is trying to talk to Mary, and he hasn't getting an answer back. So he turns around, and Mary's just passed out on the bed. So he goes to check on her, and shakes her around and like moves her head around, and there's no reply. Her heartbeat's still there, but for a second they make you think that she just died. But so they took her to the hospital. Found out that she overdosed on pills, and she went to a coma. So I was like, man, this girl is bad news. And Colt tried to tell him that, last season. He said, stay away from her. She's bad news. She'll get you in trouble. But no, didn't listen. So so they go to the hospital, and they call Beau and Joanne and Heather, and they all come up there. And Joanne and Heather take Mary back to the house, and Beau gives Luke a ride, and in the car, Luke tries to say something, and Beau's like, look, I don't have anything to say to you. I'm just here because you're my brother's son, and that's pretty much it. Kind of like, it's kind of one of them things, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed, and that hurts more than anything because, that's Luke's only family is Beau and Colt. He didn't have any other remaining family, so for them to be disappointing him, I know that had to hurt him, and you can kind of tell throughout the season that, he got his stuff together and he knew he had a problem. And once Luke gets back, he tries to patch things up with Colt. Colt's working in his house, and right now Colt's living in a tent because, at the end of Part 6, he couldn't get any of his cows to the market, so he just, he has no money, he's just kind of living off without water or electricity. He's living in his tent inside of his unfinished home. And, it was kind of rough at first. He's like, man, I tried to tell you about her. I can't trust you anymore. I'm not going to go in a partnership with you or make any deals with you. And Luke's like, all right, I understand. And then, so Colt went to go sell his cows at some auction. And Luke shows up and ends up buying it for way above the price that should have went for. He outbid Newman's Hill and everybody. He was like, look, man, if I can't just get into a partnership with you like that, I'm just going to buy your cows and, pretty much force you to be my partner or whatever. And so they finally, they hatch it out and everything, and they're all good to go. And you kind of flashes back to Mary and Heather, and you can tell, they still have even after being in a coma, she still has a drug problem really bad. She still wants to take pills, and, because Luke came over to bring her McDonald's and, just hang out with her, and she was like, look, we got to talk, we need to get a divorce and all this. And then she's like, I like you, but, we need to slow it down. And he was like, yeah, okay. And all of a sudden they just start talking, and in the next 5 minutes, she's yelling at him saying, you don't know me, I don't have a problem, because he tried to tell her she had a drug problem, and he wanted to get her help, but she didn't want anything to do with that. So he kicked him out of the house, and later on down the road, she comes up to Luke's house asking for money because she has not paid her house payment in 6 months, and they're about to get evicted. So he was like, I already spent like $40,000 in debt here. I've done lost money, lost everything. So let me let me see what I got, and I can see what I can do. And she was like, okay, and then she left. So Luke, he obviously is not going to give the money to Heather or to Mary, so he calls Heather up and asks to meet him at the bar, and there, obviously Heather's not really fond of Luke, because obviously he's part of the reason that they just went to the hospital, because she overdosed on pills that he had, and so he was like, hey, pretty much, I know you don't like me, but I'm here to help, and I want to help your mom pay the house payment and everything. But if I give her the money, there's no telling where it will go. So I'm gonna give it to you and trust that you get it in the bank and pay the bill. And she was like, okay, thank you. And it kind of cuts away, and then it cuts back a few minutes later, and she calls him up or comes and sees him or something like that, and come to find out, as soon as she deposited the money into her bank account, her mom drained the account at the ATM and got all the cash out. So there was no money in there to pay the bill with, and so then it kind of cuts to where Wilkerson, the cop, he's at Heather and Mary's house, and he's evicting them, but Mary's nowhere to be found. She's just off somewhere. So they were like, how can we find my mom? And they were like, Wilkerson, tell them put one over the call trying to find her. And he was like, well, I can't do that unless she committed a crime. So he says, well, what kind of crime has she committed lately? And Heather was like, well, she's driving my car with my name on it, so you can tell him that. And he was like, whoa, that's grand theft. If we call that in and she gets caught, that's going to be some serious time in jail. And Heather really didn't care. She was like, well, she can't do drugs in prison, so it's better off than leaving her out here. And so they called in, and they finally get her and take her into jail, and Luke and Heather come up to the jail to talk to her, and they were like, it just seemed like it was just normal conversation at first, make sure she's okay, and then Mary just, I guess, expects to, all right, let's go home now, and Heather and Luke kind of look at each other, and they're like, no, we're not billing you out today. And her mom and starts freaking out and yelling at everybody, and just just cussing them out and saying, F you, you piece of crap, blah, blah, blah. And so they just left. And then come to find out, like a few minutes later or a few days later, Mary's out on bail. And they were like, who bailed her out? And then Nick walks in the room, and obviously that Nick, yes, the Nick that you're thinking of, the guy that got Rooster killed. He's responsible for his death. At least Colt thinks that, and I think the same thing. He killed off the most important character on the show. To me, he's one of the funnier guys. So yeah, when I saw him, I was like, God, they brought this idiot back, man. I'm sick and tired of this, man. He done ruined the show almost. Just taking out Rooster. But then it just kind of cuts to Colt at the ranch, and the the water supply from the creek has been just dried out. And they were like, what the heck, why is the creek dried out? It's supposed to be just like a natural river or natural water source. And so they walk all the way up and down the creek, him and Beau and Luke, and they find a dam at one of the ranches that Newman's Hill owns. And so they're like, what in the heck is this? So yeah, they do that, and then Beau pretty much tells Colt, like, hey man, don't do anything stupid. And so the next day they went and talked to Lisa Newman, the head rancher at Newman's Hill, and she's like, I mean, we own that, and we own the rights to the water supply, and if we want to do it, we can. And so they try to get a lawyer to go against her, but they pretty much said there's nothing really you can do. So Colt's just kind of down and out again, the usual Colt thing. Something starts going good, and all of a sudden he hits a brick wall, and it's, all hell's breaking loose. So Colt finds out that he's not the only ranch affected by it. There's actually 3 other ranchers and ranches that are affected by the creek being dried out. And so they just kind of trying to think about something to do. He's trying to be a hero, but he don't want to. Obviously can't afford to go to jail or anything like that because he has a kid now, and he's really worried about her. So then that's kind of the end of that for a little while, and they cuts over to Beau and Joanne, and they're just talking about their vacation to Europe and planning it and where they want to go. And Beau's also like, no, I'm not going to Europe. I'm not going to France. I'm not going here. And pretty much he don't really want to go anywhere because he can find a problem with everything, being the hardcore conservative that he is, and he just can't figure out where they want to go. So I guess a few hours later, where they're sitting on the front porch and they're just talking about what their bucket lists are and where their cabin in Montana is, what they call it. And Beau says, I can't really think of anything. I don't really have any goals or whatever you want to call it. I don't have any dreams like that. And everybody's like, that's sad. And then later on, they're just sitting on the porch again, and he just like talking to Joanne was like, you know what? I just, I love being with you, and you're my cabin in Montana. And then he gets on one knee and was like, will you marry me? And Joanne just kind of sits in silence and kind of gets mad and starts crying a little bit. And he's like, what's wrong? And come to find out, Joanne actually has been diagnosed with the early stages of Alzheimer's. And it's just getting progressively worse the older she gets, is what the doctor was saying. So she makes it her decision where she wants to move to Arizona with her daughter because she don't want Beau to remember her, with Alzheimer's. She wants him to remember her as being a fun-loving, funny person, not just the person that she's going to end up being. So she says, and I already thought about it, I made my decision, nothing you can do about it. So she just leaves. And Beau ends up talking to Colt or somebody about, I think maybe Luke or Colt, and they end up saying, hey man, this is the best thing that ever happened to you. I haven't seen you happy ever, and until she came into your life. So you need to go, tell her like, hey, you're here for her, you want to take care of her. So that's what he does. He ends up driving all the way to Arizona, meeting up with her, and he brings a camera and a photo booth or a photo album or photo book or whatever you want to call it. And I said, this is what they're going to do from here on out. They're going to take pictures and keep their memories in this photo album. And obviously she's happy about it, and she decides to come back with him, and they come back to Colorado. And then, I guess after a couple of days of being back, they're sitting on the porch again, and it's the reverse of what happened the first time. Joanne ends up asking Beau to marry him, and it's like an ongoing joke throughout the rest of the part 7. He's just like, I asked her to marry me, not the other way around, not the other way around, not the other way around, blah, blah, blah. It's like he was embarrassed that she asked him to marry him, or marry her, so he had to go around telling everybody, clarifying that he's the one that asked her to marry him. But, yeah, and then it cuts back to, the cabin, Luke's cabin and hunting cabin, and Mary walks in and was like, hey, I know you don't want to see me, blah, 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 but I don't feel safe. And Luke kind of just shrugs her off and sends her home. And I'm just like, hey, I don't trust you. I don't want to talk to you and all this, which is obvious. I mean, that's a reasonable thing. I mean, she just kind of kicked him out of her house, and she's got a real bad drug problem. And then she took the money that he was going to use to help her pay the bill to buy drugs with. So, and then it kind of cuts to Mary at Nick's trailer, and they're talking about how they're out of pills, and she's like flipping out, like like an average druggie would. You don't have any pills, you need to get some. You're like, oh, I gotta get some pills, I don't have any, what the hell are we gonna do? And Nick's like, whoa, calm down. He's like, I got something, I got somebody I can get something from, unless you're scared of needles, pretty much implying that they're about to do heroin. And she was like, no, just go get it. I mean, I don't care, just hurry up, go. So then it cuts away, and then a little bit down the road, she comes back over to Luke's cabin and was like, hey, I'm, I know I need help and this, that, and the other, and I'd like to go get rehab, but I couldn't. But I know if I go by myself, I'm not going to, take myself to do it, so I need you to drive me up there if you wouldn't mind. He was like, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. So they get, like, I guess almost there, and they stop and get gas at a gas station. And she's, like, kissing all over him, telling him I love you, kind of just playing with his head a little bit. And he was like, I love you too, and we'll get through this together. And she was like, yeah. And then she was like, oh, can you give me a ginger ale? So when he walks in the gas station to get ginger ale, she gets behind the wheel and just drives his car off and just leaves him stranded, and she ends up selling it for heroin later on, and so luckily for Luke, that Hank from the bar, he was there, so he gave him a ride back home, and so they finally got back home, and when he gets back home, Colt kind of tells him like, hey, there's an old El Camino that is beat up and old in the Peterson Ranch barn. so you can try to work on it if you want. And so him and Beau, they start working on it together, and they come to find out all it is wrong with it is it just needs new fuel. So they were like working hours on it all day trying to figure out what was wrong with it, changing parts, taking it apart, putting it back together, and nothing seemed to work. And all of a sudden they just put new fuel in it and it started working. So they were like, man, I can't believe it. And then back to Colt, Beau and Joanne ended up getting married, and they had a wedding out there at the ranch, like in the front yard by the barn and the porch. And right after the wedding, Luke and Colt sneak off to go to the Newman's Hill Dam, and they end up blowing it up and coming back home that night like nothing happened. And then the next day, cops rolled up and they were questioning Colt and everybody, and they kept denying it, and they even got Abby to deny it, and at the police station. And right after that, Colt kind of brings up divorce because they keep on arguing. They're not getting anywhere with their relationship. So he quickly regrets saying divorce, but then they go back and forth. And eventually Colt does sign the papers, and Abby signs the papers. And then that's that. They're divorced. They're done. And so I was like, that's about time. I mean, they've been working on this for like 2.5 seasons or 2.5 parts here. So I'm glad they finally figured it out, and maybe they can just be friends now, whatever. And then the cops pretty much show up, and Lisa Newman talks to Colt and was like, hey, look, bottom line is we have a wildlife camera out there, and we caught you on footage. We have pictures of you blowing up the dam. So you either have two choices. You can either sell me your ranch or you're going to jail. And Colt being Colt, he literally just says no. I mean, it's not right what you're doing, and he keeps fighting for what he believes in. And I understand to an extent, but at the same time, you're like, come on, man, you got a kid now. You gotta think before you do stuff. You can't just be impulsive your whole life. And so he ends up going to jail, and everybody around town's calling him a hero, and like he's trying to act like he's Robin Hood, take it from the poor, or take it from the rich, give it to the poor, and helping them out. And but they're not the ones that have to sit in jail. He's going to be that guy that sits in jail. So is it really worth it to him? And to him, it is. It's worth it. And so he sits a couple nights or a couple hours in jail, and then all of a sudden he gets released. Which, come to find out, right after that happened, Beau went over to Lisa Newman's office and said, "Hey, I'll sell you my ranch as long as you stop building the dam and you set Colt free and drop the charges." And so she agrees. So he gets out and he starts acting like, see what I did there? I told you they were going back out. Blah, blah, blah. He was like, son, I sold my ranch. He's like, what? You sold what? He was acting like a big deal. Like, go get it back. Go get your ranch back. Let me sit in jail. It's okay. And so they start going back and forth, and they kind of end it there. And so then all the boys, they decide to go. Beau, Colt, and Luke, they decided to go bowling together, because all they're talking about their spiraling lives and all their problems and stuff. So they go and sit out or they go head to bowling in the El Camino, and all of a sudden the El Camino runs out of gas because they didn't tell them that the gas gauge doesn't work. So they were just sitting on the side of the road, broke down with their bowling balls and a case of beer. So they drank all their beer, just sitting there having a heart-to-heart about, their problems. And, it was a nice little conversation for them. Beau don't get too many heart-to-hearts with Colt and Luke, so it's nice to see that. And they end up bowling with the empty beer bottles that they finished. And so they end up doing that, and then they finally get picked up. I think the AAA guy or somebody that knows Colt was his center back in high school, so he knew him. And they told him back to the house, or to the gas station, and they got back to the house. And as soon as they get to the house, they walk in, and while this was going on, Abby was at the pharmacy, and she saw Mary trying to get drugs with prescription that was for somebody else, or the fake prescription or something. And then she sees Abby, so she's like, Abby, can you please help me, vouch for me? They won't believe me, blah, blah. And Abby's like, you need help or something? And, obviously Mary denies it and starts making a scene. And then all of a sudden Nick walks in and grabs Mary by the arm and says, all right, let's go. We got to go. We got to go somewhere. And so Abby sees Nick, and Nick was like, oh, tell Colt that I'm really sorry about Rooster, like in a real, dickhead fashion. So they send them on their way, and And then so that's what we get back to when they get back from the bowling experience on the side of the road. And they walk in, and Abby's already there telling Joanne about it. And so they tell, the boys, hey, Nick's back in town. And they all kind of like look shocked. And, well, Luke don't really know who he is, but Colt and Beau look super shocked. And first thing Beau does, he kind of just walks over to the gun cabinet, grabs a pistol, loads it, and walks out and says, they're like, where are you going, Beau? And he's like, I'm about to go do what I should have did last time, or what I should have did before. So he walks out, and then Luke's like, who is that? And they're like, that's the guy that's, that pretty much responsible for Rooster's death, and he's the one that's been hurting Mary. And he was like, oh, she came and told me she didn't feel safe, and I just blew her off thinking she was trying to get more money out of me. Oh, I got to go after him. And so he followed Beau, and then Colt was just there by himself, and he was like, all right, I'm going to go check on Peyton. So he walks upstairs, and then you can see him in the background, like hopping out from the second window, trying to sneak out. And Abby sees him, so she walks over to him, and she was like, Colt, what are you doing? If you go, there's no chance in us. And he was like, so you're saying, what do you mean a chance? Is there a chance we're going to get back together? She's like, I don't know. He's like, I thought so. Then he slammed the door and just backs out. And then the final scene of the movie, or of the series, excuse me, or the part 7 anyways. There's part 8 coming out next year. But the final scene, it shows Nick walking towards his he rides a motorcycle, pulls up to his trailer, walks in, and all you hear him say is, what are you doing here? And then it kind of sits there for a couple seconds, and then you hear a loud gunshot, and then it cuts off. So pretty much this season had a bunch of good parts and a bunch of kind of slow parts, I guess. But the ending, leave you on a cliffhanger, as the past couple have. It was a good. It makes you just can't wait for the next, the final installment season of the last part of season 4, which would be, I guess, part 8. It should be coming out in like March or April, somewhere around that area, if the timetable was correct, because usually they come out about 6 months apart. So 6 months apart from September will be about March or April, somewhere in that area. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait too much to wait on it, because I'm ready to see. It's sad because it's going to come to an end. It's the very last part of the series ever they announced, and so it's kind of like bittersweet. I'm ready to see it because I'm excited, and I'm I don't know what's going to happen. I'm kind of nervous, but hopefully they'll end up ending it on a high note. But so yeah, the main question coming out of this part 7 was who shot who, and would it be? There's been theories that it could be obviously one of the 3 people, or it could have been Nick. And the 2 that really are kind of like sleepers that you wouldn't think it would be. It could be Mary, defending herself against Nick, finally coming to terms and just killing him, or it could be, this is a real wild shot, but it could be Rooster. And if they make him come back, even if it's just for like off-screen comeback, that'd be sweet. Like, obviously, I would love to see Danny Masterson on screen again as Rooster, but all the little allegations he's got, there's probably not going to be a good chance of that happening. But if they can somehow make it where, he kills Nick, gets back at him for hurting Mary, and kind of just leaves a note or something like that, that'd be kind of good. Just let them know that he's still alive. That'd be a good thing. But I'll give season part 7 of The Ranch 7.5 out of 10. I mean, it was great in some parts, but like I said, it was really slow in other parts. So it's just you just got to figure it out. But yeah, I recommend going and check it out. It's a really good series. If you haven't watched all of it, just watch it from the very first episode on. It's a little time consuming, but just do it on after work or do it on the weekends, whatever you got to do. But I highly recommend it. And until next time, we'll see you.